This is Literature of the South at Mississippi State University, and my name is Hannah Withers. As a classroom teacher, I am very fascinated by the novels we choose to incorporate in our curriculum. So I wanted to talk about that in my research paper and really unpack why we still teach this, quick math in my head, 60-year-old novel, 70. Pardon me, I teach English for a reason. The title of my research paper is The Face of a Daughter, Why We Teach To Kill a Mockingbird in Schools. And we're just going to really unpack the reasons why we continue to teach Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. In an article for Yes Magazine, DJ Kashmir writes, Harper Lee's novel is the closest thing America has to required reading. And first of all, I think this is funny, just the way that it's worded. But second of all, it seems impeccably true. As a teacher in the Meridian Public Schools, I have seen firsthand just how many copies of the novel we own. I've walked into classrooms in middle schools, and the walls are filled with copies. High school is the same thing. It's a staple. I also know that the Mississippi Department of Education recommends teaching it in the 9th grade, I believe, which is what I teach. In addition, it's also included in many textbooks as not really required reading, but as an additional resource to go with many units. So, To Kill a Mockingbird is in schools. Simple Google searches, though, can show you the controversy surrounding To Kill a Mockingbird. And just, how much it's in classrooms, right? We have all of these different things that show we are teaching it and how we should, why we should, different ways we can use it, how it has been banned, how it's back in, all of these different things. And the question I keep coming back to is, why is this novel so important and why we keep reading it, right? So why? That's the question we're going to try to look at in the next 15 minutes. For me, my answer to the question why is that To Kill a Mockingbird and Atticus Finch is the easy story. Now, you may be looking at me like you are crazy, but follow along. Atticus Finch is the image of whiteness that teachers want to teach. He's the father that stands up to oppression and teaches his children to be better humans in turn. And what I mean by that is that while educators often want to tackle racial injustice and tackle issues that are hard to discuss, that can be difficult to do in the classroom. So reading a book like To Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus is this almost selfless man that teaches his kids right from wrong and teaches them how to be better people and stands up to injustice and all this good stuff, that is a really helpful angle for teachers to be teaching. They have sort of an out where they don't have to have the really hard conversation because it looks like all's well. We are teaching Atticus, who is a figure that is positive. He is the one that will stand up to all of the other people that are doing the quote wrong thing. In addition to that, oh my goodness. By revealing the deep-rooted issues of civil discourse through the gaze of a young white girl that admires her father, Lee presents educators with a simple answer: the easy story. So this is just piggybacking off of what we just said, right? By using Scout and telling the story through Scout, we are seeing a lot more simple a story. We are seeing what she sees, and that is often through the lens of this idolizing her father. She idolizes him. She thinks he's the best person ever. And so, yet again, that mounts to this positive narrative of Atticus as the savior, the figurehead of civic justice. Let's keep trekking. In an article for the Journal of Access, Anthony Verdesca says, in 1960, Harper Lee bequeathed to the literary world and high school students, yet again, we're getting in that jab that it is basically required reading for Americans. Macomb County lawyer Atticus Finch, in the name, a name that has become synonymous with civic virtue, right? So we've looked at this idea that he is a figurehead for civic justice, right? That he has done good things for people in the fictional world. Pardon me. Oops, sorry, y'all. And so that is just one piece of the puzzle, right? That he is synonymous with civic virtue. I really like that quote. It's very interesting. So let's keep tracking. Let's look at the way he treats his children. This is a picture from the movie, and it really reminds me of the way Atticus treats his daughter and cares for his daughter. He's not a hands-off kind of dad. He may have Calpurnia come and cook and clean and all that good stuff, but it's not like he just sends his kids off with her. He loves them. He teaches them. He reads with them. And this relationship he has with his daughter is really reflective of who he is as a person and this positive narrative we have surrounding Atticus. He is a very important character in the way he holds himself and the way he treats people in general. And you can see that in the way he treats his children. It's very reflective of his character overall. This is one of the most iconic quotes from the novel and the movie for that matter. First of all, he said, "If you can learn a simple trick, you'll get along with all types of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from their point of view, until you climb into their skin and walk around in it." And this is a very fascinating way he teaches his students, his children to be, right? He wants them to be empathetic. He wants them to think about other people. And by teaching his children to be this way, it is revealing so much about his personality, that he is this type of person. And it is mounting on top of, the layers we have talked about. It is adding this layer of, here's who I am as a person, me being Atticus in this equation. And then he is going to go on to be this lawyer that goes up against all these people and does all these things. And this is easy for teachers to teach. They're not having to unpack all the layers of nuance and how things were bad. I mean, you have to touch on that, but all in all, we can focus on, here is this man that is standing up for what is right and teaching his children how to do better. All right, now let's look at the case. This is the moment where Atticus takes on the case. Judge Taylor comes over. He says, "Hey, Atticus, I got a case for you." And he takes it on, much to the dismay of Macomb, Alabama. So here's a quote from the novel that I found particularly illuminating. It says, "There's been some high talk around town to the effect that I shouldn't do much about defending this man. If I didn't, I couldn't hold up my head in town. I couldn't represent this county legislator. I couldn't even tell you or Jim not to do something again." And this particular quote reveals two things. First of all, it reveals up here how Macomb feels about Atticus in this case. Macomb wants Atticus to take the case and just sort of, how should we put this? Not really help him. Just take it, show up, yawn, not really try to help Tom Robinson. But Atticus says if he didn't actually try to help him, he couldn't do these things. He couldn't even hold up his head. He couldn't tell Jim not to do something silly. He couldn't tell Scout not to have a fight on the playground, right? Because he wasn't holding up his end of the bargain. He wasn't being the man he believed he would be. So that's very telling of his character. In addition, right, we have this scene, and I feel like someone has made this cartoon, but I could not find it. But it says, we were surprised one morning to find a cartoon in the Montgomery Advisor above the caption, Makeham's Finch. It showed Atticus barefooted in short pants, chained to a desk. He was diligently writing on a slate, while some frivolous-looking girls yelled yoo-hoo at him. And yet again, this is feeding right back into this idea that people don't want him to take on this case. They don't want him to really try to help. And because he really tries to help, he begins to be scrutinized. And so all of this is very transparently important to the character, building the character of Atticus as someone that can be trusted, as someone that is just pure and helpful and kind and smart and all of these adjectives that we can use to describe him. And yet, there's one thing that still bothers me about this whole scenario that we have built. So we've already established that To Kill a Mockingbird and Atticus is the easy story, right? We can depict Atticus as this great man, and that is the easy story. But in this narrative, Atticus Finch is presented as the white savior, that the African Americans, Tom Robinson, needed this white man to save him. And that is this is a particularly problematic view. So there are some ways, though, that we can continue to use To Kill a Mockingbird. One idea is to update it. Kashmir qualifies that one solution for keeping To Kill a Mockingbird in schools is to incorporate its 2015 counterpart alongside the original. And I think this is a really good idea, and we actually touched on this in class, because in Go Set a Watchman, Jean Louise Finch returns to Macomb, Alabama to find out that her father is no longer as, how shall we put it, lily white as he once was. He's reading racist pamphlets. He is not supporting the desegregation of schools. And this hits Jean Louise hard. But it is shoving, sorry y'all, this little bubble bothers me. It is shoving Atticus from his pedestal and exposing that Atticus himself is not the hero depicted in Scout's Youth, right? And so it is taking a bit of that white savior narrative out of the equation. And that's very important. And so here's a quote from Go Set a Watchman that sort of touches on this moment where she realizes that all is not the way it seems. Jean Louise crossed the room again to straighten the stack of books on his lamp table. And she was doing so, she found a pamphlet the size of a business envelope. On its cover was a drawing of a Negro. Above the drawing was printed the Black Plague. And so she reads it. And she's appalled by what she finds there, right? We've read the novel. She's appalled by what she finds there. And so the Atticus in Go Set a Watchman is very different than the one in Mockingbird. She finds this racist pamphlet and realizes that her idol is reading about the inherent inferiority of Black Americans over white Americans, and she can't really believe it. It is something that is very hard for Jean Louise to process, because This is not her father. This is not what she expects of him. And so we can look at this. We can look at this in a lot of different ways, but I think this is an illuminating and kind of curious quote to read. So it says, if Atticus Finch is not quite the plaster saint that he is in To Kill a Mockingbird, there could be something rich and fascinating about that. And even more than this particular quote, I think it is important to remember that by showing Atticus's flaws, it is shattering this white savior narrative, and it is exposing that even Atticus is not perfect. And that is very important for students and readers to see. Okay, that's idea number 1. Idea number 2 is to provide some alternatives for To Kill a Mockingbird. And this is a article by PBS. In 2019, they asked educators to give some options for teachers who want to diversify their curriculum. And these educators offered books that shift the perspective. And this is important, y'all, because we've talked about that Scout is telling the story in To Kill a Mockingbird. And she is a young, white, innocent person that idolizes her dad, right? And so these are novels that are very different, and they follow a very different narrative. So that is another way we can do this, by incorporating novels in our curriculum that are diverse. In fact, we can also, like in Durham, it says high school students in Durham will now be able to study alternatives to the Pulitzer Prize winning novel To Kill a Mockingbird to better reflect their student demographic. And essentially the program that they put together was a choice novel unit where they had lots of different options. Some of these might have been those options. And then one of them is To Kill a Mockingbird. And they were all reading something with a similar theme, but they got to pick something that better reflected their demographic. And that is very important. That's an important option to give our students. And so it says, the book is still available as a choice of study, but students have the option of making the choice. And then they acknowledge that they have a very diverse population of students. And in closing, I think it's very important for us to think about that as we're picking pieces of curriculum for our students. We can still enjoy, too far. We can still enjoy the easy narrative of To Kill a Mockingbird. We can still unpack the things that Atticus does and the way he helps Tom Robinson and the innocence of Jean Louise Finch. But we can also add into our curriculum moments of hesitation, moments of confusion from Go Set a Watchman. We can show the contrast of Atticus, the great hero, and Atticus, the possibly fallen hero. Those are things we can do as readers to be resistant readers, to be learners, and to help our students do that. Thank you so much.